Hey, what is going on, everybody? Now, a buddy of mine from Brazil asked me to do a form validation using, well, only JavaScript, so no PHP, and I'm going to show you how you can validate names, phone numbers, zip codes, passwords, and emails using JavaScript regular expressions. Now, for the UI, I'm going to use materialized CSS, so we're going to have a bit more easier time designing the UI, so not that much CSS. Because our main focus is actually on the validation of this form. Now let me also show you what the form does. So you will quickly see we have here on this input field of enter name and the full name, we have a bluish line, bluish greenish line. As soon as I click out of it, it's going to turn red. Now this is just a simple way to tell you that the form is invalid. Also, if you try to submit this form, validate all fields. So we have an alert which will ask us to validate all fields. Now also, if we click through this, all of the fields will turn red. As soon as we type in the correct regular expression, the correct input, this input field will be valid and it will turn itself into another color. Also, let me show you, let's hit inspect. And I'm going to show this to the right side so I can show you something. Now let me hit refresh here. And we are on this input field. Let me make this just a tinge smaller. Okay, so I hope you can see this. So we are, let's select a input field. Let's select this one. Let me refresh again. So I'm just going to select the input field, but without clicking it. Okay, so we have a input with a placeholder, enter your full name. It has an ID. Let me make this a bit larger. A full name and a type of text. Now, as soon as I click in it and click out of it, it will have a class of not valid. Now, in order to make this valid, we have two options. First of all, we can type in a name. Let's say Manhart. And if I tab out of it, it's still invalid. So it needs a full name. Let's say Norbert. And now if I tab out of it, the class turns to valid. Okay, now this field is valid. Now also left in the possibility to type in a third name. Most of us, like me, sadly have a third name, which we actually don't need. This would be Bernard. Okay, so I tap out of it. This will work. If I have a space, another space, this will not work. So I cannot type in a fourth name. You could obviously add this, and this would be also like a challenge for you to add the fourth one here. But this is the way that I validated. So you can have two names, your family name and your name, or you can have three names. Now for the phone number. Now we could start with 3 digits, then we can have a dash, we can have 3 digits again, another dash, and 4 digits. Now if I click out of it, this will be valid. I could delete this dash, this would be also valid. If I delete this one, click out of it, this would be also valid. But if I type in one more digit, this will not be valid. So it has a limited number of digits, okay? Now if I don't have enough digits, this will also not be valid. Okay, so let's validate this one. Click out of it. Now enter zip code. Now regular zip codes, and this depends on the country you're in. Let's say we have a kind of zip code and it has 5 digits. Now this would be valid. I could also type in a dash and type in a couple of other 3 more decimals, actually 4 more, sorry about that. 4 more decimals, and this will also be valid. If I type in a 5th one, this will no longer be valid. I can delete this, this will be valid. If I delete the dash, this will no longer be valid. Okay, so you could either live in a 5-digit zip code or a 5 plus 4. It was, I believe, 4. Okay, now let's leave this valid. Now for the password. The password will accept any kind of letters, you can see this, and any kind of digits. Now, if I try to validate this, delete one and delete another one, this will only be valid if it has a certain length. So the length that I chose for this one was 10. Now, obviously, you can make this much complexer. It should have a capital letter. It should have a sign within it. You can make this much complexer, but I'm giving you an idea of how we can design this. Now for the email. A regular email should always have something, let's say Norbert, then an @, then a second group of letters, then a dot. So you can see this is still not valid. Now we need either a U, this is valid, a IO, this is also valid, a .com, this is also valid. Actually, this only refers to the length. You could add in this these groups of letters. So it's .com, .org, let's say .org. Now I limited this to be either 2, the minimum of 2 letters, and the maximum of 5 letters. So the maximum of 5 letters would be media. Let's say there are some kind of email address that end with media. This is actually the maximum that I know of. But you cannot do media team, for example. Okay, so this is no longer valid. Now what you can do, let's say you can also do info, and this is also valid. What you can do is type in here main art and dash bar now. Okay, and this is also valid. You will include a dash here and also a dot here. Okay, this will also be valid, as you can see. Now when we submit this, it will submit itself, and also we can click now through all of them. You will see they're all valid, and it will only submit itself. So let me delete this. This is no longer valid. If I try to submit it, they will not work. If I will get the alert, if I make all of them valid, and let me show you this again. So we're going to delete this. We are now, let's select this one. We are now in the, let's go down here, and we're here. Okay, so this is the only field that is not valid. Now because it's not valid, when we try to submit it, we'll get the alert of fields, validate all fields. So let's click on OK. If I make this valid, it will submit itself and it will just refresh. Okay, so now it can submit itself and it refreshes completely. Okay, so this is the project. Let's get into it. Now first things first, let's start with the UI. So I just created a empty folder, and within here we're going to start with a index.html. Let's start with the boilerplate, so shift exclamation mark. Up here I'm going to include materialize CSS, and actually let me snap this to the right side. Now I can change this to the bottom again. So this will be the finished project, and we're going to go to the console. Let's have our console opened. Let's go to materialize. So we're going to go to materialize.css.com, click on get started, and we're going to copy only the CSS link. We don't need the JavaScript link. Okay, let's paste it in. Let me make this smaller. So we have this set up. Now let's also link up our style.css file, which we will create later on. Okay, we have this done. Make this a bit smaller. Now let's go into the body. And within our body, we're going to create, first of all, a form container, which will be just a general div. So let's do this, and it will have a class of .form container. Okay, within our div, we're going to create our form. And so let's use the keyword form, or the tag form. We're going to leave the action as a hash, so we don't want to go it anywhere, and we don't want to create a post or a get request. Now I'm going to pack each label and input tag, so everything that you see here, we're going to pack into another div, which will have a class of input container dash container. Now within here, we're going to start first of all with the label. and this will be for the input field with the class of full, not with the class, but with the ID of full name. And to also have here a full name. Okay, now underneath our label, we're going to create an input tag, which will have the type of text. Now we would also give it a ID, and the ID will be the same that we give here for the label for the for. And the last thing that we need is a placeholder. And the placeholder will be enter your full name. Okay, and now I can just basically take this and copy it a couple of more times. Let me first of all open this up using live server. So I'm using live server, which is just an extension for Visual Studio Code. So there's our first field. Now let's copy this one time, and this would be for the phone. So I'm going to double click on this, then Control D or Command D on the Mac, and I'm going to replace this with phone. We're going to place also the for and the ID here, and we'll replace the placeholder with enter your phone number. Okay, now we can copy this again. And this one will be for the zip code. So let's replace this for. Let's select the phone. And let's type in here zip code. And we'll also replace here, instead of phone number, we have zip code. Okay, now we have two more fields. One will be for the password. So let's select both of this. Let's type in password. And we'll also change this to password. And now I'm going to replace enter your password. Okay, and the last field will be the email address. So let's paste password with email, and the type will be text. Oh, sorry, this will be email. The ID will be email, and enter your email address. Okay, so we have this one done. Now the last thing that we need down here is an input tag with the type of submit. And for the value, we're going to also type in submit. And we're also going to give it a class. And now this will be a materialized CSS class. This would be a btn and red. This will give me that red button right there, that red submit button. Now I also want to give it a ID in order to grab onto this later on in JavaScript, and let's just type in submit btn. Okay, so that's basically for the form. Now all we need to do down here is include our script tag, and we'll name this validate.js. Okay, next up, let's create our CSS file. So style.css, and there's basically not much CSS here. I'm just going to create, I love to create variables. So if you want to change this later on, you just need to change these two variables. And one will be for the form BG, so the form background. This will be a hexadecimal color of, let's say, 13232F, the bluish color. Not this. Yo, there we go. And one less color, this will be just a light color. And this will be hash DDDDD. Or let's go with FFF. Okay. Now we can take our body tag and give it a background color of var. So in order to use our variables, we need the keyword var. Now within parentheses, we're going to use here the form background color. We're going to change the background color of our form. Next, we're going to take the form itself. I'll go outside. This is not SASS, this is regular CSS. So the form tag, and let's change this background color to a var of, hey, actually this should be the form background color. What am I doing here? Yo, you should be down here and you should be the light color. Light color. That's much better. Okay, let's also give this a width of 300 pixels. Let's push it into the center and also down a bit with margin from the top, 5 rem, and bottom. And left and right, let's place it as auto. This will push it a bit down. Now let's also give the form a bit of a padding. Padding, there we go. Of 2 rem, top, right, left, and bottom also. So all around. Now let's trim down the borders by using border radius. Let's say 5 pixels. If you're not satisfied, then you can change this, obviously. And let's also give it a box shadow in order to pop it out a bit. Of 1 pixel, 0. Let's say 90 pixels, 2 pixels, and an RGBA of 0, 0, 0, which is a dark color, and let's say 0.5 for opacity. And there we go. We have a beautiful form. Now, if you wish to make this a bit larger, let's make it 400 pixels. There we go. Okay, now I want to change the labels. So let's grab onto the label, and I just want to change the color of the labels. Color to, let's say, light color. No, wait. I chose actually a bit darker light color. So DDD. Okay, now let's grab onto the input tags, and we're just going to change the color of the input to var light color. I also want to change the input placeholder, and for this we're going to select our input tag, then placeholder, and we can change the color of the placeholder to a gray color. So color, and let's type in gray, and that's it for input and placeholder. Now the last thing that I want to do is create a not valid class. So if the input tag has a class which is not valid, then a couple of things will happen. First of all, not square brackets. What am I doing? This is not JavaScript. This is not an array. Okay, so first of all, the color of the text will be red. Now I need to set this as important because our CSS or material CSS is overwriting our options here. So if you set it as important, it's going to overwrite the CSS, the material CSS options. And the last thing that I want to do is to also change the bottom, the border to the bottom to 1 pixel, solid, red, and also important. And that's it. Okay, so we're done with our styling. If one of them, let's give one of them a class of let's go to the last one. Let's go to the first one. Hey, they all have full name. Oh, Jesus. So you should be phone, you should be zip code, you should be password, and you should be email address. Just email. Okay, that's much better. And I said that I want to give this input. Let's go here, class of not valid. So if I type something in here in the phone, you see it's a white text and the border to the bottom is a greenish, bluish, greenish. But now if I type something in our class of not valid, it's going to have a red text and also the color, the border to the bottom will have a red color. Okay, so that's it for styling. Now let's jump into JavaScript. Okay, so let's create our JavaScript file. So let's go in here, let's create a file. We called it validate.js. Let's close this one up. And first things first, we need to grab onto everything from the DOM, everything that we need. So let's type in here comment, get elements from the DOM. Then we will add event listeners to them, event listeners. After that, we're going to type in the comment, create validation functions. So validation functions. And then we still need to do something, but I'm not going to type it in right now because I want to show it to you first. I want to show it to you first and then explain it. So let me also zoom in a bit. Boom, there we go. First things first, grab onto the elements. So we need, first of all, to create a variable with the keyword const. This is not going to change. We're going to call it full name. And we're going to grab on from the document using get element by ID. You can also use query selector if you want. We're going to grab onto the full name ID. Okay, let's hit save. Let's now open up our console. So either you hit right click, inspect, then go to console, or you hit F12. Now I'm going to drag it up a bit. And now let's also console log everything that we grab on. So you know, I always love to do this. So full name, space it in here, full name, and there's a full name. Perfect. Next thing, let's create another const, and this time we're going to grab onto the phone. So I could actually just copy this, change this to phone, and also this one, so phone, and you were with a capital P. So let's console log this also, phone, there we go, excellent. I'm going to grab it and paste and drag it to the right a bit. Okay, let's get another const. This will be the zip code. Zip code. So document, get element by ID. And we're going to grab onto the ID of zip code. Okay, let's console log it. There we go, there's our zip code. And we now need a email and a password. So password, let's place this as password. You should have a capital P. Console log it. There's a password, and the last thing that we need is the email address. Let's replace this one with email. Email. What am I doing? Now I want to change this to a capital M, and this was a capital E. Okay. Boom. Comma and email. And there we go. We have everything that we need. Okay, now it's time to add event listeners to them. So we're going to grab onto the full name dot add event listener, and we're going to add a blur. Now what this will do, let's say blur, and then a function. I'm going to just quickly show you something. So we're going to console log in focus. Okay, so let me comment out this console log. We don't need it anymore. Have a space. What will this do? So if I click in here, nothing happens. If I click outside of it, this function will be launched. So in focus. If I click on it again, nothing happens. If I click outside of it, again, we have our console log of in focus. So this will only be launched when we are first of all focused and then out of focus. Okay, so let me comment this one out. And also, well, actually I don't need anything from here. We actually need a function. So when we are out of focus, we're going to validate full name. Okay, so this function will be launched as soon as we're out of focus. So let's create it. Function validate full name. And now let me go down here and create a regular expression for stuff. So I'm going to use a const. And let's call this regx for the full name. I don't like it. It should be capital. So please do not mistake this with this one, okay? And we are going to assign this to regular expression. So let's create a regular expression with // Now everything that we type in within here is going to be a regular expression. Although it seems like a comment right now, believe me, we're going to change it. So first of all, let's use our caret. This means it needs to start with, and we're going to use between brackets. It could have a group of letters, any letter from A to Z, and also capital letters from A to Z. Now, as you can remember, I typed in here my name. Now my name needs to be at least 2. So we're going to limit this for at least 2 and maximum 20 letters. Now next up, we're going to use here a parenthesis in order to create a space, and also give it a space. So after, for example, Meinhardt, we can type in Norbert. So I could just copy this and paste it in here. So we have these two. Now let's also use our $, because it needs to end with this. Okay, so let's try this out. If this, so this is the regular expression. Now let's go down here and let's create a condition. So if not regular expression full name dot test, and it's going to test for the full name. So this input right here dot value, so the value that we type in within our input. So if this is not true, then the full name, so the input dot class lists, will have, so we need to use the keyword add, a class of not valid. So this is the class that we created in CSS. Now else, and let me actually console log something. So else valid, and let me comment this one out. It's much easier to understand this way. Else it's not valid. Okay, so if I type right now, if we select it, oh no, I don't want to select it because we're going to give it, we're going to have it in console. So as soon as I selected it, we're going to get not valid. As soon as I click out, instead of that blur, as soon as that blur effect is triggered, we're going to get not valid. Now, if I type something in here, let's say Norbert, and click out of it, it's still not valid. But if I go ahead, have a space, and type in Meinhardt, it's going to be valid. Now, if it's valid, then we need to have another class because right now, let me actually test this. I think I need to save it. It has the class of valid, not valid, because I already put it in here. Okay, let's go outside. Let's go back into JavaScript, and now let's actually do this like with adding the class of not valid. Then we need to remove, if it's valid, we need to remove that class. So I'm just going to copy this, comment out our console logs, we don't need them anymore, and change, so paste it in here and change it to remove instead of add. We're going to remove this class, and we're going to add the class of valid. So let's paste, let's copy, paste, add the class of valid. Now, if it's not valid, and it has the class of valid, we need to remove it up here. So I'm going to go up here and type in remove the class of valid. Okay, now let's test it. So we are now, let me grab this one. We are now on here. Okay, not the label, the input. We have the class of not valid because it's empty. Let's type in Norbert Meinhardt. And as soon as I tab, oh, the space in here, as soon as I tab out of it, it's going to be valid. Okay, it's going to change to valid. Now I said that I want to have a option to type in a third name. In order to create that option, we're first going to create another group. Now we're going to make this group optional, and for this we're going to use the question sign. Now this group could have an empty space. It could start with an empty space. So you can see we have within this parenthesis another parenthesis, and we can then tell it that it could have exactly the same thing again. Okay, so although I type in here, let's say Meinhardt Norbert, it's still, hey, why not valid? Wait just a sec. Oh, the dollar sign. Now the dollar sign needs to be here at the end. What am I doing? Okay, let's hit save again. We have a space here. That's in that group. Okay, so Meinhardt Norbert. And I forgot, what did I forget? This should be here. You really need to be careful with the spaces, and it's a bit zoomed in. I can't see everything. So this is correct, this is correct, this is correct. So we have the space, then the group starts and the group ends here. Then question mark, dollar sign, and end of the regular expression. Now it should work. So let's see, Norbert Meinhardt, tab out, it's valid, and we could also add Barna, and it's still valid. Okay. Next up, let's create the regular expression for the phone number. So I'm going to go in here, copy this. Let's replace this with phone. I'm going to replace the function with phone. Okay, now let's create this function. Let's go down here, function, validate phone. Now let's first of all create a regular expression for the phone validation. So let's create another const. Let's call this reg x for regular expression, and this will be for the phone. So it's going to look for this regular expression when it's going to test the phone. Now again, // for regular expression. Let's also close this up. At the end, use our caret for the start and our dollar sign for the end. And within here, we're going to escape first of all. So this is actually /. And now we'll use a couple of groups. So first of all, within parentheses, this is a optional /d which means that it could be any kind of digit. And this digit, we're going to limit to be maximal and minimal of 3 digits. Okay, now after our group, after our parenthesis, wait a second, and here we need to close this one up again. We're going to again use a question mark. So we have now another option to add a dash, a dot, or a space. Then another question mark, and it could be again any kind of digit as long as it's a length of 3. Then between brackets, we're going to tell it again, it could have a dash or a hyphen, a dot, or a space. And then at the end, we could have, again with a question mark, a /d, so any kind of digit. And this should have the length of 4. Okay? So let's test this. Go down here. And let's say if, actually I'm going to copy this from up here. And let's replace our full name with phone. This regular expression. And it's going to test for the phone value. Now this part right here, I'm going to create a validation function. So let's create a function which is going to be, first of all, for not valid. And this function will have exactly these 2 properties. So I'm going to cut them out from here and paste them in here. Now I'm going to replace this full name with an argument. But any function can take in an argument, and this function will take in an input. Now any kind of input that will be, well, put in here is going to go into the function and replace these two inputs from the front. Now the input, so the input that we're going to type in here is going to go in here and then check for the class list, and it's going to add a not valid, and then it's going to check for the class list again and remove if it has a valid. Now we can do the same thing for when it's valid, and we just need the other 2 options from here. So I'm going to cut these 2 out and replace them within here. And again, it should be the argument of the input. Well, where are you going? Okay, now let's see if this works. So we don't need our console logs. So right here, we're going to use a not valid function. And we're going to, for the argument, we're going to use, well, the phone. Okay, and now for the valid function, again, we're going to paste in the phone. So let's check out. So let's check this out if this works. So let's try 555-555. Let's go out. It doesn't work because we still need 4 digits. So again, 555. And now it works. And we can also see the functions here are working. And in order to test this out, let me demonstrate that if we comment out this part and this part for the full name and replace it with, let's go down here, not valid, and the argument should be the full name this time. And down here, else valid. And let's pass in the argument of full name again. And let's try this one out. So Norbert Menhart, tab out of it, and you can see it's valid. Also here, 55, 555, and 4555, tab out, and it's valid. Okay, next up we have our zip code. So let's create here another event listener. We're going to add an event listener for the zip code this time, and the function will be validate zip code. So zip code. Let's type in here comment validation functions. Okay, now I'm just going to copy what we had up here. Let's change the phone to zip code. Let's change this one. Let's change actually from here everything to zip code. Okay, yep, this is correct. And now for the regular expression. Now for the zip code, it's pretty easy. We can delete everything that we have in here. And now let's just say it should be any kind of digit from 0 to 9, which should have a minimum length of 5. Then we create a group. Well, it can start with, oh yeah, and we're also going to make the group optional, and it can start with a hyphen and then another digit group from 0 to 9. And there should be a maximum length of 4. And basically that's it. So let's test this. For the zip code, let's say 55555. Tab out of it, this works. And now the next one will be, let's say 4444. Tab out of it, and this also works. If I type in another 4, this does not work. Okay, now the last two things that we actually need is password and email. The password is pretty simple. So let's first of all go up here, copy the event listener. Let's change this to password and also the other one. So password, and here should be capital P. Okay, let's take this one again. Let's copy it. Let's change this two to password. It's a bit too much password. Password, then also you are password, and within here I'm going to change and replace the variable of password. All right, and now for the password, let me delete everything so we can start for the very beginning. As I said, the password could be any kind of letter. It could be also any kind of capital letter from A to Z, and it could also be any kind of digit. But it needs to be it needs to be at least 10 long. Okay, so this, actually need to group this in parentheses, and that's it. So let's try this out. Pum, 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 pum. And we have a bit too much password in here. Yep, now it's valid. Okay, last thing is the email address. So let's copy it. Let's add first of all an event listener. This is the more complex one. So let's type in here email. I believe this was the variable. Yep, that's the variable. Then here email. Let's copy the function for the validation. This would be email. And also down here we'll have email. Now for the variable, it was email with a capital M. Okay. So now let's go to the regular expression. Now this is a bit more complex. Not only that it will start with A to Z and also capital letters and whoa, should do that, and also digits, but it could also have an underline. Then we need to escape, and now we could have a hyphen, and we need to escape again, and we could also have a dot. Now we need to use here a plus sign because right after this one, and let me take out this 10, don't want to limit it. Right after this group, we'll have the @ sign. Now this means that this is a multiplier, and this could be only 1. Okay, now let's create another group, and in this group we'll have again everything that we had in here. So I'm just going to copy this, and also the plus sign. Now after a plus sign, and also leaving the group, we'll have a / dot, because this is now the dot literal, so the dot that we type into .com, .org, .whatever. And now we'll have another group, and this group is going to have no digits, so only A to Z and also capital letters A to Z. And it can be only, and they should be between brackets. Okay, now after brackets, we're going to limit this to be at least 2 and maximal of 5 long. And that's basically it. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's type in here Norbert. Let's use a hyphen, Menhart at media.com. If I tab out, this works. Now if I do here something like that, it doesn't work. If I take out, so this should work now. If I take out the @ this no longer works, so we need to have the @ within here. And we could replace this with a dot, as I said, and so far and so on. Okay, now as you can see, we validated all. Let me actually go for it. We don't need this console again. So let's start from the beginning. Let's type in Menhart Barna Norbert, all caps. Woo! Yeah, this also works. Let's type in a phone number or something. This also works. Let's type in a zip code of 66666. This also works. Let's type in here any letters and numbers, but not longer than 10. And now let's type in norbert.menhart@media.com. And that's it. Now, in order to validate this, because now if I click on submit, let's see what happens. Well, it submits, but it shouldn't submit. It should, right now, okay, type in a something.com. As you can see, nothing happens, but if I open up the console now, let me show you something. Now, it does something. It does a bit of submit because you can see there's a refresh happening here. Now this is because the default behavior of any form is to submit. Now let's grab onto our form, .query selector, and let's go in here. Let's grab onto the tag of form. Oh, just misclicked. So the tag of form. Let's add an event listener. And we're going to listen for the submit event. Now, when the submit event happens, we're going to use the arrow function. And within here, we're also going to listen to the actual event. So we're going to pass in the event. And then we're going to say e.default behavior, or actually prevent default, which will prevent default prevention. What do I type in default prevention? So prevent default. which is a function, and this will prevent the default behavior of submitting. Now, after we prevented the default behavior, the form no longer submits, so we need to run a function which will check if everything is valid, then it can submit. Now for this I'm going to use, so let's create the function validate form, let's call it. Okay, now let's go outside of this. Let's create our function validate form. And in order to see if all of the inputs are valid, we're going to grab onto all inputs. Let's create a const. You call the inputs document.querySelector all. And we're going to grab on from the form to all of the inputs. Okay. Now let's console log all of the inputs. So basically, if I type in here something and something and something and click on submit, it's going to grab onto all of the inputs. Okay, and I'm only doing this in order to see that they have the classes of not valid, not valid, not valid, not valid, and didn't type in here anything. So let's submit it again. And we're going to have here all of our inputs which are not valid. So we need to check if the inputs are valid, only then the form will submit itself. So let's go down here. Let's get the if statement. And this if statement is going to check if the full name dot class list, what am I typing here? Class list dot contains the class of valid. Then something should happen. But this is not enough. We want to check all of them. So end. And to take the next one. If the phone, what am I doing? So phone dot class list dot so far and so on contains the class of valid, and I'm going to copy the end and this one, paste it in here, and the zip code dot class list contains valid. So also if the zip code is valid, and also if the password is valid, and also if the email is valid. I'm missing an end here. So also if the email is valid. Now all of them, what did I type in here? Email. Jesus. Okay, so all of them need to be valid. Only then the document dot query selector, we're going to grab onto the form again. Form. In order to change now the behavior of the form, we're going to type in here dot submit. This operator will submit the form now. So if all of them are valid, the form will be submitted. Else, we also need the else statement. If they're not valid, we're going to alert. I'm going to alert something like validate all fields. Okay, and we're going to return. So nothing will happen. Now let's check this out. If let's submit it. So we get this alert, all fields are validate all fields, and you can see all of them. None of them contains the valid class list. So let me submit this again, and we can see all of them have now a class of invalid or not valid. Okay, now what we need to do is to click here on OK. Now all we need to do is add them. So all we need to do is input now the correct inputs. So Norbert, Reinhard, I don't want to have here space, with some kind of phone number, with some kind of zip code, with some kind of password. Can count to 10. What is wrong with me? Okay, and Norbert underscore Meinhardt at media.info. Okay, and now if you click on submit, the form just validated. Or did it? Oh, because I typed in the star. Wait just a second. Submitting, I have to take out the action. Now we need to type in everything again. Norbert. Some kind of phone number. Some kind of zip code. Password. And something at something.com. Click on submit, and there we go. The form just validated. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you did, hit that thumbs down. Consider subscribing to my channel, and catch you next time. Bye bye.